Hello, people. Once again, I have Gunnar Lindbloom here, and Gunnar has always been a very reliable interview. But this time we bring him on because there's some stuff going around, and Gunnar wanted to talk about it a little bit. And one thing I respect about Gunnar, he doesn't run and hide from things. You know, I shouldn't say that because people might say that about me, but Gunnar is here to answer something that's going on right now, and I don't really know much about it, but I'm gonna let basically Gunnar talk about it. Gunnar, how you
Well,
doing?
good, man. Thanks for having me. I didn't really. You reached out to me. I didn't actually reach out to you as far as
Right,
like
exactly.
talking
I'm
about this
sorry.
'cause I honestly don't really care that much.
Right.
But just for the confused of the people who have watched the little video and I'll straighten it out. I made a whole video. It's like a 30-40 minute video on my channel explaining uh the truth of the matter is I didn't really know who my great grandfather was, and so I misspoke on Vlad. And that was my own fault because I wanted to kind of seem like I knew what I was talking about when in fact I didn't. But the truth was I never knew, didn't care. I never met the man, my great grandfather. And the only thing that I knew is that when I brought up my great grandfather to my grandpa once or twice in my like 14, 15 years old, he would get very reticent and not. He'd look at my grandma both times, said something in Sicilian, and she said, "Leave it alone, Alonzo." And I don't know what that meant or why. Now, when I'm sitting around with Scott Bernstein one day, real life talking, where I'm telling him all kinds of like stories about people and places that there's no way I could possibly know without being deeply involved. He knows that because he's been studying that family for 20 years. So I mean, he's heard like stories about people and places that just are impossible to know. And anyways, I said, so I'm thinking my great grandfather was Joe Tocco, because he tells me the story. William Vito Tocco had a brother who was really a cousin. They were raised together as brothers. They had a brother. He was murdered in the 30s. And then I'm like, well, why didn't William Vito Tocco kill his killers? And Scott says, there's a lot of contention over that. Don't really know why. There's a lot of people saying like they didn't, like he was doing something foul, sleep with another woman when he shouldn't have. Da, 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 da. And then I'm like, well, that would make sense why my grandpa doesn't want to talk about it, because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so his father was murdered for sleeping with another man's wife, and his own cousin slash brother allowed that to happen. And all of this makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, so me and Scott, we both like, this must be it, right? And he's like, yeah, it makes sense. And so I just was like, yeah, I just went with it because I'm like, that makes sense. I never had the inclination to do an ancestry. Like that's the difference between me and some of these people who are obsessed with this genre and this thing. I never cared. I didn't care back then about who was who's what, who was when. I never cared, and I don't care now. I didn't spend any energy or time or effort looking it up. I probably should have, or would have made myself look like a dummy. But so it's just funny because just yesterday, thinking, okay, so my great grandfather is in fact Sam Tocco. So I do a Google search one time for Sam Tocco, and up pops an article, and it talks about how Pete Gotti Jr. Tocco was getting married, and this other. And actually, I queued it up on my phone. I'm going to read you a little segment of it. You guys are bad. It goes on to talk about local gangland insiders claim Tocco began chauffeuring Jackaloni, which is really, or with Jackie the Kid around, blah 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 blah, and dying together. Anyways, the moral story is there's two Peter Toccos they're talking about. The two Peter Toccos aren't related either. Gotti is the son of Salvatore Mops Tocco, indicted, eventually acquitted, and family blah blah
Okay.
blah.
Wait. Right now, we're going to lose people because they're not
Well,
going to know.
all I'm saying is the moral is what I'm trying to say is the Tocco family in Detroit was a big family, right? And there are a bunch of them who maybe weren't first cousins, but were all family, acted like cousins. They all hailed from Terracini, Sicily. So Terracini, Sicily is a small enclave or a small like little town outside of Palermo, right? Now, some of the family went here, and there, but the ones who all kind of knew each other, relatives wise, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandfathers, all ended up in Detroit. So yeah, if my grandfather ended up in St. Louis, yes, I remember that. Somebody said, "Hey, go to Detroit where you have cousins, aunts, and uncles, and they'll put you to work there." And boom, that's what he did. In fact, he ended up moving 3 blocks away from Jack Tocco, who was his friend his whole life. Now, Jack Tocco was the boss of the family. These guys were Goombadis. They hung out, they played bocce, and all through my life, we would go to the same weddings, the same events, same anniversary parties, same funerals, and I was just introduced as this is a Tocco, and my grandfather was a Tocco, and I just said, okay, these are uncles, aunts, and cousins. Now that's how an Italian family works. You don't go, well, hey, how is he a Tocco? How is he a Tocco? For example, I knew I had cousins in Clinton Township, Paulie and Joe, who were the son of little Paulie and then their old man Paul, and they were related to or like Nove Tocco was their uncle. Didn't know any of these guys. Nove Tocco was the one who ended up ratting and flipping on Jack Tocco. Guess what? None of them were related. None of them. And you could look that up. So
okay,
Paul,
let me ask you a question. So okay, so you put out your book and you went on Vlad, and this is one of the things that they're saying, and that you're not related to the gangster side of the Toccos.
That's absurd.
Well, that's basically what.
Well, they can say whatever they want. I don't know. It doesn't matter what the. It's not. I mean, it doesn't mean what. Listen, all of these Toccos were family in terms of family. Some of them lived in Clinton Township. Some lived in Sterling Heights. Some lived in Grosse Pointe. I lived in Grosse Pointe, right by the boss, where my grandfather lived, right next to the boss, and did business together. Had a contract for 40 years, thanks to the boss. They were Gumbadis. And so I don't know how anyone could ever say I wasn't related to that.
And what was your grandfather's name? Just wondering.
Peter Paul Tocco, and you can look it up as birth record. He lived on Lake Point in Grosse Pointe. Now, if you look,
it was Vito.
Peter Paul Tocco.
Now, who is this right here?
That's William Vito Tocco, an old. He died long before I was even born. I think he died about the year I was born. That's William Vito Tocco, who I thought was a great uncle, which wasn't. Okay. See, the thing is, like I tried to tell, like I'm saying to you, is there are like 2 or 3 Tocco families in the Metro Detroit area. They all are under one flag, which is the Tocco crime family. Some more than others. Some aren't related first cousins, but they're all related via second, third, fourth cousins back to Terracini. They didn't just happen to end up in the same city, in the same neighborhood, in the same place, from the same place, accidentally. They all knew who was there and why were they going there, and they all went there for a reason. Just like my grandfather ended up there. He lived 3 blocks away. You mean to tell me that my grandfather, who's 11 years older than Jack Tocco, ended up in Grosse Pointe, 3 blocks away from Jack Tocco, and lived there for 65 years. Their kids went to the same school, St. Ambrose Catholic school, and they went to the same wedding, same function, same everything for 60, 70 years. You mean to tell me that they didn't know each other or they weren't involved with something together? My grandfather was very revered. They loved my grandpa. They played bocce the ball together. I can't tell you how many weddings and funerals and crap I'd seen these guys. I didn't care back then. You know why? I was a knuckleheaded kid. I was a kid. I didn't even want to go to these events, these funerals and stuff. I mean, they're like, you got to get dressed to go to your aunt so-and-so's funeral. I don't even know her. I don't even care, but they forced me to go.
Why do you think that someone is literally come out and showed evidence where they believe it's evidence that they're not related?
That's not evidence at all, man. All they did, in fact, they did establish that I am a Tocco. They gave my bloodline. There it is, my Tocco. And there's other Toccos. You can go to Pete Gotti Tocco, Pete Specs Tocco. These guys aren't blood related to the boss Tocco, but they're still high-level mafioso right now in Detroit. I mean, and they're not blood related at all. I mean, like they're maybe second or third cousins down the road, but they're no closer to the Tocco mafia family than I was. But we all looked at each other as cousins, uncles, aunts, whatever. Here's the thing, like I told you before. I did the Detroit Italian Festival 2 years in a row. It's a 2.5-day event. Over 200,000 Italian Americans show up at the Freedom Hill. I had a beautiful big booth displayed out, sold hundreds and hundreds of books, thousands of dollars worth of merch. All the mafioso came by. Some gave me an eyeball, like, not really, approving this. Many came by and bought books, shook my hand, congratulated me. I'm going to tell you a quick story. One is Vince Giacalone, the boss, Jackie's brother, stopped by and shook my hand, and we talked for a minute, and he said, yeah, I remember you. He's like, how much was my uncle paying you for doing collections? And I told him. He laughed. He's like, geez, I would have paid you freaking 10. I would have paid you 10%. I was getting like 3. And we were laughing. We talked for a minute. Ha, 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 whatever. Now, in the middle of this conversation, he goes, I said, you ain't got a problem with what I'm doing here with my books and stuff. And he goes, nah, I don't care. He's like, but that Scott Bernstein, I don't like his shit. And I literally turned around, and Scott Bernstein was sitting in my booth. He was sitting right there in my booth. And I go, well, he's right there if you want to say something to him. And the guy, he goes, no, it's not that serious, whatever. And then, like, when he walked away, I said, that was Vince Giacalone. He goes, oh, what are you saying? He said he threw a book at you or something, but he's like, nah, he checked me about a picture. It was in the book. I had it labeled wrong. Which, as a matter of fact, I have this book right here. Here's his book. I've had this since I was in prison. This is the book somebody gave me in prison. And again, with regards to that book, when I got that book, I learned a lot of stuff about my family from that book. And when I sat down with Scott Bernstein and went over the book, I learned a lot more, because really, I was just a tiny little cog in a great big machine, and I only knew a few guys that I was around thanks to my grandpa and my uncle Pete and Sal, maybe Tony Jack here and there, but I was a tiny little nobody in a great big machine of engine that I didn't know that much about. But the other thing is this: my cousin Chris, I'll say his name, Chris. I don't want to say his last name, but let's just say he's a Tocco. He comes by my booth, right? This is an interesting story. I'm sitting at the booth, and I see this. I'm talking to some fans. They want to sign books. I'm talking to them. And then he's watching me from like 20 feet away. And then he says, hey, man, can I have a word with you? And he looks like a tough guy, and he looks like a serious guy. And I know he's got to be probably, involved. He comes over and he says, you remember me? I'm like, I don't know. Is it your cousin Chris? I'm like, from the market? He said, yeah. He's like, man, holy shit, man, I remember you were one crazy SOB, man. You and your Uncle Pete and blah, blah, blah. So he starts bringing up all these stories, right? And I start telling him about my books, and he's congratulating me. This is a true story. And he says, he is a Tocco, last name. And he says, I said, hey, man, I know I'm not technically a Tocco. My last name's Lindbloom. Before I could finish that sentence, he put his hand on my shoulder and says, stop that. He said, don't ever say that. You're a Tocco. You'll always be a Tocco. And we're proud of you. He said, come see me in your market anytime. Here's my number, blah, blah, blah. Then he says, I want to show you something. Honey, he yells. His wife and daughters are over there. He says, come here. I want you to meet somebody. Because he had been married and had kids after I went to prison. He comes over and he sees his little girls. He's got two little girls there. They're like 10 years old. One of them's like 10. He says, honey, Gracie, this is your cousin Alonzo. He's like, you're named after his mother. His grandmother was at your baptism, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, whoa. And it brought tears to my eyes. I was like really humbled by that. I couldn't believe it. These are guys that know me since I was childhood. There's a ton of Toccos around. Some are more involved than others, but we all thought of each other as cousins, right? Or uncles and aunts. And we never really bothered to see how. I didn't know, didn't care. And then still don't care, because I'm not going to look up a family tree. Scott Bernstein even doesn't go that deep into it. There's one thing. When I told him about this, he laughed and he goes, are they trying to say that you weren't a Tocco or involved in that life with them? I'm like, yeah. He says, that's insane. Why would you even bother addressing it? I'm like, I'm just saying, they don't get it. They think just because my great grandfather wasn't who I thought it was, now I wasn't involved at all. But one thing you won't have, Lee, ever, is somebody from my family or who was involved come on a live show and say, hey, I can tell you what, Gunner wasn't involved in that life, or he wasn't part of it, because they'd be lying. Because they'd never do that. They wouldn't come on anyways, but if they would, be a lie.
One of the things that was, and as you know, I told you I received this stuff in the email. One of the things that was said is that this plan was basically conceived while you were in prison, and that you were never related to the Toccos in any way.
Oh my God.
This is what they're saying.
I don't care what they say. Let them say it. Say it all you want. Blast it out. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. Conceived as a person. The dude literally did establish, I am a Tocco. Here's your whole bloodline. Your mother was Grace Tocco. I lived in Grosse Pointe. You can look that up. We lived on Lake Point. The boss lived on Middlesex. Everybody lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools. So I am a Tocco. Thanks, buddy. You established it. Was I working under the boss of the family, the Tocco boss? No. My grandpa was his paisan, his gumbadi, one of his very close and dear friends. They were together all the time. And when I got older, I didn't even think about this shit in prison, bro. I didn't even think about this shit while I was in the street. I didn't care. If somebody called me and said, hey, listen, Alonzo, I got something for you. You want to make a buck? I'd say, yeah, what is it? Let's go. That was it. Most of the time, I was on my own, doing my own thing. I didn't care. I was not impressed. I'm not like these mob groupie dweeby mother effers, bro. I wasn't impressed by old men. They're fat old men that can't whoop my ass. That's how I thought. Now, I was kind of too stupid to realize these old men have power and juice and could have me killed, but they never would. You know why? Because I was family, and they've known me since I was a kid. So if they know me as a kid and I was family, they're not just going to freaking whack me for disrespect me. I used to bust their balls all the time, these old men, and say stuff like that. Gee, you can't whoop my ass, old man. Whatever. And that's how I saw them. So if they wanted me to do something, I did. Yeah, they could have had somebody whack me out if I was disrespectful, but I did tons of shit that was disrespectful and got away with it. Why? Because I was family. To them, I was family. How the bloodline was, they didn't care. They had grown up with my grandfather his entire life, their entire life, all in the same neighborhood. It's the same thing as, imagine if two families come from the same little town in Sicily and moved to Brooklyn and lived 3 blocks away. One of them, and they had the same last name, and they hang out together. One of them's well-established mafioso. One you can't really establish a mafia line to, but obviously they're together. Everything's the same together. Just like if you go looking right now at Specs Tocco or Gotti Tocco, the kid who's my age or whatever, and look at them, or Nove Tocco, the rat who ratted on Jack. None of these guys can be directly related to Jack Tocco, the family they're talking about. However, they are all high-level mafioso, and some of their records imply that they've been busted and indicted and stuff. I never got indicted for organized crime. I was just indicted for petty bullshit, which is what I claim to be, just kind of a petty scam and hustler and robber and bad guy. That's all I ever claimed. I think they like to think that I think I'm claiming I'm some big shot mafioso in a Tocco crime family. But I have cousins to this day that I still talk to, that some of them are involved, and they would tell you, they're like, Al was a freaking lunatic back in the day. He was the guy you called.
Gunner, that's what they are saying. They're saying that
anybody can say anything, man. I can say you can say you're an astronaut.
Let me just finish, Gunner, please. I'm just telling you what they're saying to me, and you're good enough to come on here and talk to me.
I don't care though. So I mean, I'm telling you my side of it. I don't know what they say to me.
Well, you wrote your book and all that stuff, and
my book has nothing to do with my real life. It's a fictional novel. Nothing.
Did you take it out of that type of life at all, or?
My book, so anybody who reads my book will know that obviously I had to have some deep, intimate knowledge of that world in order to recreate the world that I did in my book. There are some events in there, smaller, lesser events that were inspired by events in my life. Some characters that are in the book that were inspired by real characters in the book. There are some characters that are more of an amalgamation of characters in the book. Like say the boss, Don Falcone, would be a kind of combination between my grandfather and Jack Tocco. But other than that, no, the book is completely fiction, and it's way bigger, way more grandiose, way bigger. And you got to read my book, bro. It's nothing like my life. And I've shared my life, true life stories, in things called Lindbloom Chronicles. And they're just little petty rackets and scams and hustles that are kind of anecdotal and funny. I rubbed around elbows with my Uncle Peter. That's another one. These people do enough research, you'll find that my Uncle Pete Tocco, Peter Paul Tocco Jr., he was a wise guy. He was a hustler. He was connected to all the bikers. He was busted for drugs, in and out of jail, tough guy. This is my mother's brother, all right, who grew up with Jack Tocco's kids, going to the same school. Same with my Uncle Sal. And everybody lived together in a few blocks. They played bocce ball every Sunday at Trombley Elementary School, where I went to elementary school. And then the nice days in the summer, they put a barbecue up and they go play bocce. All these old Italian men, right at Trombley. Sometimes they would do it at Middlesex Park. A 3-mile park or Windmill Point Park. Whatever the case is, I was around them. I would try to get them to take me fishing. That's all I wanted to do, because 2 of the parks are on the water. And so, you grow up around these guys your whole life. And when you walk into a room, or they walk into your room, and your mother says, Alonzo, this is your Uncle Tony. This is your Uncle Joe. This is your cousin Billy. This is you. When you're a kid, you're just, okay. So, hi, and you see him, you just say, hey, Billy, hi, Uncle Joe. Hi. That's it. For the next however many years you see him, you're not doing research trying to figure out who the frick they are, because you don't give a fuck. I certainly didn't. Some people might, and that's that. Now, here's where I'll tell you the story intersects. I really wasn't doing much of anything for anybody other than my Uncle Pete until I was about 20 years old. I had just gone to jail. I got expelled from school at age 15 years old. And was running around hustling, selling a little bit of weed and drugs, steroids, blah, blah, blah. I get busted selling steroids and go to jail for 6 months. When I get out, I go to live with my grandma and grandpa Tocco in Grosse Pointe, right? Guess who is over our house all the time? Jack Tocco, Tony Tocco, Joe Tocco, my grandpa's Gumbatis. Joe Tocco, I was told, was my grandfather's brother. I don't know if he was his half brother or whatever, but he looked like a mafioso, big fat dude with a pinky ring. He loved me. I crashed his Cadillac one time. Anyways, they would come, and Tony Jack started coming around this time. And I'm not sure why Tony Jack would start coming around at that time, but my grandpa was telling all of them, they all knew I was this fucked up kid who just did all this. I just got out of jail. I got like 5 felonies. I've been expelled from school. And so what do you think's going to happen with some mafiosos who are around their Gumbati, this old man, their paisan, they've been around their whole life, and they see his grandson living with him, who's a thug, in and out of jail, getting out of trouble. He's a big muscle-bound tough guy, whatever. So this is what happens. At one point, I got a beep. In the beep, I didn't recognize it. I call it back, and it's a woman that was introduced to me as my aunt. I'm not even sure how she was my aunt. She's hysterical. She says her son had got beat up by the kids in the neighborhood, and Tony said, call me. to handle this. All right. So Tony Jack. So I shot over there on my motorcycle, went and punked out the kids in the neighborhood, punked them out, went in their backyard. Mother effers, you put my hands on my cousin and get your hands on my cousin again, I'll come back and smash you bitches. Right. So now Tony says, okay, the kid, he'll handle his business. Shortly after that, week 2, 4 weeks later, whatever it was, I don't remember. I was like 20. I get another call early in the morning. I'm living with my grandparents. I'm in the basement sleeping. It's like 7 in the morning. And I get a call from Tony Jack, and he says, hey, listen, I need you to help me handle something. Can you handle something? I said, well, what is it? And he tells me how this girlfriend, he was Gumar or whatever, had a ex-husband show up drunk and slap her around, and he wanted me to handle it. Can you handle it? I said, yeah, give me the address. So moral of that story is I shot over to the house, snuck in, and pulverized this dude. Just smashed his face in. Just a bloody hamburger mess. Me and my boy Dario, my cousin. He didn't hit him. He hit him with a pool stick, but I'd already smashed him. I had a big nugget ring. Dragged him out, down the stairs, threw him out, said, if you ever come back here, put your hands on this one again, I'll kill you. That's that. She calls Tony Jack, says, I don't know who that was who you sent over here, but he was for no gains. He came straight in here and smashed my ex. From that day on, Tony started going, you know something? How about you work security at a poker game? How about we get you a job bouncing at Brownies? How much you get you bouncing at Wolverine, at Jack Lucido's spot, at the Gourmet House, blah, blah, blah. And that really started prior to this when I was just got out of jail. I went to my cousin Nina Mizuraka's graduation party, which is a big deal. Graduation parties are a big deal. All the family shows up. I was at the beach. My grandmother calls me and says, what are you doing? Why aren't you at your cousin's graduation party? I'm like, I ain't seen a little girl since she was 14, man. She's like, get here. Don't disrespect your cousin. Get here now. It's in Grosse Pointe. Here's the directions. So I shoot on my motorcycle. I pull up. I go in the back, get a plate of food. I'm eating the food, and I hear, now you got Tony Jack and some of my other uncles and cousins, my grandfather, sitting around a table. I really don't want to say my cousin's name, who is married to Tony Jack's daughter, because he's not the nicest guy, but if you could do a genealogy, you can figure it out if anyone really wants to know. They're all sitting there, and my grandpa says to Tony, why don't you give Alonzo a job at the shop? Now, I didn't know what the shop was at the time, but they're speaking in Sicilian. I don't really understand much. I just hear Alonzo, so I perk up, and I'm listening. Then I start paying attention. I can hear my grandma says, no, he just got out of jail. I don't want him getting in trouble. And I'm like, what the hell is she even talking about? This is a job. I didn't really want a job. I had a job bouncing at this club. I didn't want a job. Selling weed and steroids was my job. And so, anyways, the moral of the story was, afterwards, my grandmother said, no, I don't want him working at the shop. Turns out they had some illegal activity in the shop. And my grandmother was aware of it and didn't want me going there. I just got out of jail. She wanted me to go to college, which I ended up doing. For 2 years, I went to college part-time while I lived with them. In the meantime, my grandpa said, nah, I know Alonzo's probably not going to end up a college boy. So here's the thing, Tony, here's his beeper number. If you ever need him for a job, here's his beeper number. And that's when Tony started beeping me to do things. My Uncle Pete was doing the same thing all the time. Some of his paisans that were in the biker world were using me for this and that. And that's all I did. I run messages. I pick up money. A few times I slap guys around. I punch guys around, whatever. That was it. I never said, oh, I'm a big shot mob guy. I'm in the mob. Nah, man, I'm trying to make a couple bucks. I didn't care. I was a lazy bum who wanted to, go to the beach, smoke weed, hustle weed, and bang chicks. I wasn't into chasing, like being in the mob or Cosa Nostra world, none of that. And those guys who were, that wasn't my world. I knew it from my Uncle Pete. My Uncle Pete, my mother's brother, would tell, around that age, would explain to me the who's who, who's what, who's when, who's what. And I'm like, great, whatever. They never, like he said, you're a half-breed, you're a defeto. You're never going to go anywhere anyway. So I'm like, all right, cool. He's like, but you don't want that.
So Gunnar, you are saying that this video that was made is accurate about your grandfather.
Yeah.
But you didn't know, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I thought my great-grandfather was Joe Tocco. I just kind of made the assumption based on what I knew about my great-grandfather, which was nothing. I didn't know anything about my great-grandfather, other than the fact that my grandpa didn't want to talk about him when I asked, which was like when I was 14, 15 years old. And then when me and Scott Bernstein were sitting around talking about like my relation to Jack Tocco, we said the story of how the dude was murdered and for cheating on his wife with another maid dude's girl. And I'm like, that's probably why my grandpa didn't want to talk about it. And so that made sense. So like a dummy, when I'm getting interviewed, I'm glad I just kind of blurted that out, but not really knowing. But it is what it is. And I'm sure that I have a big feeling that my great grandfather, Sam Tocco, was probably involved in organized crime too. Whatever the case is, my grandpa didn't end up in Detroit 3 blocks away from William Vito Tocco and Jack Tocco by accident. It's all the places in the world they could have landed. after he went to St. Louis and went in the military. Of all the places, he just happened to accidentally, coincidentally, landed right there, and then they went into business together. And because my grandfather had a contract for 40 years with the Wayne County schools, you can't get that contract unless you're plugged in, with the mob. There's no way you can't. It's the only way you can have it. The boss arranges that, and you get it, the boss gets a kickback, and everybody's happy. You just can't. Anyways, and they had the produce business was in the Eastern Market. Anybody who knows Detroit or anything about Detroit knows the Eastern Market is literally ground zero for the mob. The whole freaking mafia has businesses in the Eastern Market. Our business was there, and when you see somebody walk up, you say, "Hey, Uncle Tony. Hey, Uncle Joe. Hey, Aunt Lena. Hey," and that's it. And the cousin this and cousin that. And you grow up like that. Everybody's an aunt and uncle. That's how you're introduced. Scott Bernstein would tell you that, because when I told him the story of my life, he goes, I said, "Yeah, I was told he was my uncle." He's like, "I know, bro. Everybody's an uncle or an aunt or cousin." I said, "Yeah."
Have you
And you never really.
Have you talked to Scott Bernstein since this video came out?
Yeah, he laughed.
And let me ask you another question. A lot of people would say, okay, Gunner, pretty sharp mind. He knows all this stuff, puts all this stuff. How could he have not known that?
Well, it's pretty simple. I don't know. I didn't care. That's the thing. I am pretty sharp, but I just made the assumption based on the little bit of knowledge that I had. I guess here's what you're not getting, Lee, and what some of these kids.
I'm just asking you questions. I have.
Well, I know. But I'm saying what you're not understanding, because you're like a historian in this stuff. You're into it. All these kids are. I never was. Never cared. If I was to ask you how to catch a brook trout, Lee, could you tell me? Probably not, because you're not into it. I'm not into the history of freaking the mafia or none of that shit. My great grandfather was dead long before I came to town. By the time I was in the streets making money, it was late early 1990s. Dude, them people have been dead for 25 years. I never knew them. I didn't care to know them. Why would I even think about them? And so the people I was around, which is a limited number, I kind of knew. He's a Tocco. He's my uncle. That's my aunt. These are my cousins. I mean, I had cousins all over the freaking place that I didn't even know how they were cousins. All over the place. All the over. Like I said, my cousin Paul and Joe Tocco, which were in Clinton Township, who, still active wise guys. I remember talking to them because we went to school together for a couple of years. I'm like, how are we cousins? And we didn't know. Neither one of us knew. And I'm like, so like Nove Tocco, the one rat in the family ever, I always wondered, am I related to him? And I said, "Scott, am I related to him?" He's like, "I don't think so. No." So that made sense, because I heard that Jack Tocco wasn't related to him. Now, here's a guy, high-level made capo in the mafia, who's not related to, he is a Tocco, like me, which you've established, guy with the freaking video. But, my last name's not what my mother's is, and you established my whole bloodline. Nove Tocco was not related either to Jack Tocco, nor is Gotti Tocco, nor is Specs Tocco. All these Toccos. So I'm the only one that couldn't possibly be related. And meanwhile, they all live freaking 25, 30 miles away from where the other Toccos live. I actually live 3 blocks from them. And we went to all the funerals, and not all of them, but I went to a lot of funerals and a few weddings and a few anniversary parties, and they were always there. Jack Tocco was at my parents' wedding. My parents were at Jack Tocco's wedding. My dad has told me the story about it. So that just goes to show you how close the families were. Again, I wasn't close with Jack Tocco by any means. He was an old man. I was a freaking young punk, a stupid knucklehead. The guy said 10 words to me, and every time he did, he made me look like an asshole. He told me to sell my Mustang because I freaking looked like a punk. And because I was loud, I had kicker, and I didn't even know he was there. He said, "What do you got this cop magnet?" The reason he said that, because I've been arrested literally like 5 times over the last 3 months. And my grandpa would tell him, "I got to go bond Alonzo out again." He got arrested in that stupid car because I had a suspended license. And so when I pulled up bumping and he was there, I didn't know he was there. I come in and he goes, "Why don't you lose that cop nugget and that fucking chain? You ain't no gangster rapper. This is the boss." I like, okay. And I did. He was right. He made sense. So I bought a station wagon and drove around in that. But and the moral of the story is, I was around who I was around. You can't take it away. I am a Tocco, and there's, like me, there's a shitload of other Toccos who either aren't first cousins, but maybe second or third cousins to the Toccos. And
does it bother you, Gunner, that you did say things on Vlad and stuff, and now they're not true?
Yeah, no, that's a stupid thing. It was a stupid move of me on my part, but what are you going to do? I was just naive. I didn't know. I can't take it away. I shouldn't have said it. I wish I would have done a genealogy. I wish I would have looked up, my genealogy. Again, that's a testament how little I give a fuck. I just don't. I just never did, never cared. And that's, I'm not making fun of anybody who's into the whole mafia history or whatever. I mean, one of my closest friends is Scott Bernstein, and I respect everything he does and his work greatly. He makes a living from it, whatever. But I'm not in it. And Scott Bernstein will tell you. I'm sure if somebody's going to interview him, you're going to say, well, how did Gunner make this mistake in saying that? Here's what Scott's going to say. I already know. He's going to say, I'm friends with Gunner, and one thing I'll tell you, he doesn't give a shit. He just doesn't. And when I'm sitting there talking to Gunner, and I start babbling mafia stuff, he kind of zones off and looks the other way, and he goes, I keep forgetting you don't give a shit. And I'm like, I don't. It means nothing to me. I'm a writer today, a novelist. I wrote 10 novels. Only 2 of them are related to the mafia, and it's just one story. That's it. I'm not into it. I do have a merchandise line that's related to it, but I'm just capitalizing. This is a line of apparel and things like that I thought, hey, I could make some money on. I'm not like into it. I don't really care. If I can make money from it, great. I live in the outdoors in the middle of nowhere, a beautiful home. I like to fish and hunt, play in the woods, ride my toys. I have a good life, beautiful wife. I'm happy. I'm very comfortable. So whatever people think, they can think what they want, but they'll never be able to.
Do you think Scott Bernstein should say something about his inaccuracies because of this story?
He probably will, but I called him. I said, listen, when I brought it up, he literally ignored it and just said, dude, why do you care? I mean, and it's not his fault. He didn't say anything that was inaccurate. He just said that I was a cousin, and I am. Just not first cousin. We just both assume after having a very brief 3-minute conversation about William Vito and Joe Tocco and my grandpa, why he didn't want to talk about it. And I said, well, that makes sense. And he says, yeah, that's all he says. He's like, yeah, that does make sense. And that was the end of it.
Well, this is the knock on Vlad TV and people. They take anything they hear and they don't research it. And this is what happens.
Well, I mean, again, I didn't research my own bloodline again, but in terms of Scott, this is what he's going to say. Me and Gunner had a conversation. We kind of concluded. He concluded that Joe Tocco was probably his grandfather. It is. And he's going to say, now, if anyone is going to say that Gunner wasn't a Tocco, they're out of their mind. If they're going to say Gunner wasn't involved in the Tocco crime family during the 80s and 90s, they're out of their mind. You know why? Because he's been talking to people in the streets since the day I got home, and people have told him, the underboss's grandson said, I knew Gunner. He was a freaking live wire. Exact words. He was a live wire. This is the underboss's grandson. So I'm just saying, because I asked him, because he said he would talk to him. I said, he got to know me. And he says he does. I asked him. Anyways, so there are a lot of people who know me, but they're not going to come on YouTube and verify or validate it. But what I assure you is this. If I was making up a bunch of bullshit, which would be insane, okay, when I was at the Italian festival, while 200,000 Italians and then literally the entire mafia goes there, don't you think somebody would have walked up and been like, hey, man, running some game? It's insane. You know what happened? Guys ran up and said, how you doing, Alonzo? How you doing, Gunner? Good to see you, man. I'm glad you're out. Congratulations on your success. I heard you got a great book, blah, 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 blah. And they buy a book and a T-shirt and be on their way. Vince Giacalone, the boss's brother, bought my book, or his wife did. She said, somebody loves, she's like, so-and-so loves this book. I hope it's Jackie. And she said, so-and-so loves this book. I love this kind of books. I'm going to buy it for him. And then she bought a shirt for her daughter. Somebody told me that Jackie the Kid was there watching me. My boy Billy I saw him in the bathroom. He's not allowed to talk to me because his girl don't like me. Alondra, she don't like me. And he chased me down. I walked to the bathroom. He's like, what's up, boo? And I'm like, what's up? He's like, Jackie's here. I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He said, I saw him freaking watching you at your booth. He's like, you had a bunch of people around you talking. So I go back to my people who work in the booth. I said, you guys see an old man, glasses sitting there? And my wife says, yeah. He sat there watching for like 50 minutes. It's kind of weird. His wife kept pulling him like, can we go? Can we go? And he says, no, I'm watching the kid work. And that's what I was told about Jack. So that was it. I don't know what Jackie thinks of me at all. And I never knew the guy. I might have seen him once or twice in the market. I think I seen him at Roma one time, Roma Cafe in the market. That's it. I didn't know him, wasn't impressed by him. And I don't know what to think of him now. I don't know the guy. But the only people I was around was my Uncle Peter Paul Tocco Jr., Salvatore Tocco, my Uncle Joe Tocco, who's dead, which I was raised to believe was my grandfather's brother. He was a hustler. His son, Jerry, who I believe still runs the produce business. My cousin, Chris, who's still down there. And then and I knew a lot of guys, like Carlo Bomarito, kind of around the way, and some Palazzolos.
Why do you think these people are going out of their way?
They're bored, got no life.
But I mean, it seems like they must really have something that's bothering them.
Because they're mental. There is something bothering them. They're mentally ill. Who does that? Who cares? They care more than me. That's the funny part. They know more than I do about my own life or genealogy. Not my life, but genealogy. And because they care and I don't. That's the thing. When you're a mental kid and patient and you live with your mom, you have nothing to do, nothing but time, and you just freaking dig up through old videos. Say, he said that. Oh, I got him here. Get him. I'm going to research him. I mean, you're a loser. You know, I don't have time to do that. I'm either working on my book, or I'm out playing on my toys, or I'm out, going fishing. I'm doing something enjoyable. I'm living my life, living my dream. I spent 13 years in a cage. These guys don't get it. You can't break me down. You think some douchebag on the internet's going to freaking ruin my day? I mean, I could care less. Say whatever you want. Listen, I could close my YouTube tomorrow and just keep going with my life as a writer like I never even had a YouTube. Wouldn't bother me one bit. I'd still sell a shitload of books. If I told you how many books I sold last year, you wouldn't believe me. So, I mean, whatever the case is, I don't really care. A small handful of spastic. Look, I mean, anyone can make up anything. You look at the Spaz Buffa, for example. He's saying that I didn't do 13 years in time. He said I was a rat. I mean, people can make up anything. They can say anything. And that's how dumb they are. If they just say, well, you're saying you're a Tocco, but because you misspoke on Vlad saying that you were related to these Toccos, you weren't involved at all. You weren't a Tocco. You're not a Tocco. I mean, it's absurd. And that's why Scott Bernstein laughed. He's like, dude, if they're trying to say that you weren't involved or weren't a Tocco, they're out of their freaking mind. Because your history is there. Your criminal record is there. You grew up there. I mean, not to mention, I could go on with name after name after name of people, places, things, and events, some of which I can't say, but I've said it to Scott Bernstein in private. And every one clicks, click, 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 click. There's now a possible way. Also, if you read my book. I wrote my book by books before I ever did a research. I never read a mafia book in my life. Never. I was in prison. Didn't have the internet. Nothing. I just went from my mind on what I had there. And I wrote a masterpiece. Look at the reviews. A masterpiece that's people have said, even Sammy the Bull's producer said, we had like 4 or 5 people say that you're the best mafia writer in the world. He said that to me, called me. I said, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, what did you call me for? He's like, well, we're looking for a writer and your name keeps popping up. I said, yeah, I mean, I'm good at what I do. I said, well, read my books on my book and I'll write an outline for you. Right. So I did. He reads some of my books, called me back and goes, bro, you're freaking incredible at this. I'm like, thank you. I'd be happy to do this. So I wrote the outline. They loved it. That they didn't want to pay me my price. So we parted ways. At the end of the day, what I wrote was simply based on my own experience in that world, which wasn't that much, but with my imagination as it is, I'm able to take a little bit of what I got, the world that I saw around me as a kid. I grew up in it. Keep in mind, it's my home. My grandparents had a home in Grosse Pointe, beautiful home, and they were all Sicilians. Everybody's Sicilian. And the guy, my Uncle Nicky come over, my Uncle Tony would come over, Uncle Joe would come over, Uncle Jack would come over. They'd come and go all the time, and I hear them talk, and I see how they act, and I saw what they drove, and I hear what they'd say, and I'd pay attention. And then my Uncle Pete, when I get a little older, my Uncle Pete, Tocco, my mom's brother, started telling me the way it works and the game works, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm starting to learn. Now the time I get in trouble and kicked out of school, and I'm a scumbag, and by the time I'm 18, 19 years old, these guys, gangsters, that you think are gangsters, that I'm around, been around since my birth, all right, taught me how to play poker when I was like 8, Tony Jack and my Uncle Nicky. Then they say, hey, you want to make a buck? You work security here. Do this, do that. Once in a while, slap a guy around. They, intimidate a guy. Okay, that's what I'm good at. I'm good at that. I can do that. That's it. That's the whole story. Not much more to it.
Gunnar, let me ask you. Okay, so this comes out, right? And you say yes, it's true, which you deserve a lot of credit for. But does this change any other things that you did based on what you thought? I mean,
no.
Whether you have any other, you writing anything else right now, or
no.
So pretty much you're just saying the Vlad interview, and because you know that these people are going to keep on looking.
I don't care.
And they're going to
look.
They're going to grab every word you say, and they're going to.
I don't care, bro. Listen, I don't care what they say. They can spend the rest of their life on here doing whatever the fuck they want. It doesn't mean nothing to me. Nothing's changed. Nothing. I'm writing a political thriller right now, and that's the book that I'm publishing. It has nothing to do with this goofy ass mafia genre. I don't care less. This is not the mafia genre is cool, is good for its mainstream market. If you can tap the mainstream market of people who read, meaning if somebody's out there looking for a new book, an audio book to read, and they're skimming through books to read, and they're like, these are people who read. They're not really into the mafia, but they see the 5-star reviews and read some of them, like, wow, this sounds pretty good. I'll check it out. Boom, I read it. That's the market I'm after. But the market that's obsessed over, who did what, he did what, history and the genealogy, and they're not buying my books. They're not buying 500-page freaking $20 novels and sitting down and reading them. They're not. Never gonna. They're not buying $450 leather coats, and most of them, they got nothing. So I mean, I don't care what they think or say. They could spend the rest of their lives like trashing me, right? It won't affect me at all. In fact, I've got more subs in the last few days, maybe thanks to Dude, than I have in a while. I've also got more views, and I looked at my pay for YouTube. I'm like at like $250 for the month. I'm like, it's not much, but it's something. I don't really care. I mean, that's not where I make money. I make money from selling books and on my radio show and other things, coaching and merch. But this just doesn't affect anything, and I don't really care what they think. I mean, it's unfortunate that they we're going to sit there and waste their freaking boring ass lives on me, little old me. But it's also, I guess, Lee, you got to understand in life, when you start to win and you start to succeed, and you start to accomplish things, you're always going to have haters. They're going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to try to knock you down. They're going to try to break you down, and they're going to always make up shit. Anybody can say anything. They can use your words out of context. And again, in terms of the Vlad thing, it's a simple explanation. I didn't know. I spoke on what I thought I knew, but it really wasn't. So I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have spoke about what I thought I knew when I really didn't know. And I'm sure there will be some things that come out that I misspoke, that maybe I said the wrong place or date or person or name. That's normal. I mean, I'm 50 years old. You're telling these stories on the fly. I don't do any editing, by the way. I just record a story and go. And oftentimes, as I'm telling these stories, I change names. Because I don't know if people are active, their family, or some people still maybe not active, but they're the sons and grandsons and nephews and nieces of people who were, and they really don't want their business out there. So as I'm telling a story, I'll change a name and I'll try to do that as I go. So I'm sure people will go, hey, I don't care. Listen, again, they could spend the rest of their life on here trashing me. Watch what'll happen. Nobody will care. Only a few hundred weirdos will care. Nobody else will. I'll still get the same amount of views. And again, YouTube's gotten boring and old for me anyways. I mean, I'm glad my radio show does well. I'm making plenty of money there. And my new book's going to go take me in a whole different direction as far as my publishing career goes. So it's goofy, but I'm just happy to address it and tell how it is. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I'm just telling you, it is what it is.
Might as well talk about something that I did a story on. I did a story on Larry Mazza. And you came back at me and you said to me that story wasn't true. But that story I got, you know who I got it from. And their reputation is based on stories like that.
Well, that guy's reputation is known as somebody who does embellish and bullshit too, though. So that's a well-known fact, well-established fact. And he's a guy who will take a little piece and build it into something big because it's almost like a tabloid rag. He needs views. He needs relevance. So I'll tell you the truth. I asked Larry and got it right from his mouth. I said, "What happened?" He says there was a confrontation. The dude scumbag. He tried. It was something over money, whatever. He got angry, stood up, flung his chair back, and acted like he was going to do something. Larry jumped up when he left. The guy ran out and he was getting in his car. The guy jumped out, ran after him, and Larry freaking sped off and nearly hit him. And that's that. And he came on my show a day or two later without a scratch on him. There's nothing wrong with him. He didn't, so. But the only person that he got that story from was directly from that guy. So anybody can say anything. I could tell you I pulverized so-and-so last night and smashed your head in. Again, doesn't mean it's without hearing the other guy's side of the story. It means nothing. It's just anybody says anything. And when you're a known scumbag, a known liar, a known weasel, a known rat, you can say anything. You can literally say anything. So,
to be fair though, when Larry Mazza doesn't want to give a response to something, it's hard to get it. I actually believe I asked you.
He did give a response on my show. He was willing to give a response on my show the day after that story came out, whatever it was, a day or two after, and nobody asked. So until he was off the show, I was waiting for somebody to ask about it, and he didn't. So when somebody did ask after he was off, I addressed it, and I just told him what Larry had told me. But he's just not a guy that just engaging in the drama or the beefs or who cares. He said, she said stuff. He got better things to do, man. Larry's a very, very busy guy, very successful, and he's just got better things to do. He doesn't want to feed the fire, fuel the flames, whatever. Then he's just like, whatever, I don't care. That, again, it's kind of tabloid drama. And he said, she said, high school bullcrap. I mean, some people get off on that.
That's the Daily News that reported it. So,
well, it still is though, but it's being re-reported. But you're right. I mean, it's still because he has a subscription, like a subscription piece in that magazine. So you have to subscribe to it to get that information. So he needs stories to stay relevant. He needs them to be juicy or whatever. So I mean, and so there's some people who are into it. Again, some people are into the whole mob drama, and he said, she
Without a
said,
doubt. Some people live in this drama from morning to
yeah,
night. They
it's
don't leave
really
it.
weird. It's weird to me.
Without a doubt.
I don't, it's like Scott Bernstein, for example. I mean, he's my boy, and we talk all the time on the phone, but we don't talk about mob stuff. We talk about projects and things that are happening, as far as things happening, and we don't get into the whole mob. You know what he said to me? He's like, I said, this is what I'm trying. He said, all I'm saying is I'm trying to stay as far away from mob tube as possible. That's what he said. I said, smart man, me too. But I mean, people are going to always say what they want to say. They're going to believe what they want to believe. At the end of the day, Lee, you always got to consider this. How does it affect your bottom line? There's multiple bottom lines. You have your mental bottom line. With me, I don't give a shit. I was in prison for 13 years, man. I laid in a cage for 13 years, seething with every day I wanted to smash somebody's head in because I couldn't stand the people around me. So I was able to get through that. Nothing would bother me now. I have a beautiful home, beautiful property, beautiful wife, beautiful, I'm comfortably financed. I don't care. So there's your mental stability. I don't, say what you want. It doesn't mean I clearly I'm in that dude's head more than he's in mine. He's spending his precious time, energy, maybe money in life making videos about me. I don't even know his name. You see what I'm saying? So
He definitely spent money to put that video up and to research some things there.
Oh, so that just goes to show you what a freaking weirdo he is, man. Like, I didn't even spend money to look up my own great grandfather because, frankly, I didn't give a shit. Never did. And so, and then the other thing is, how does this affect your like these things affect your ROI? I mean, your bottom line, money wise. Is this going to affect my earnings at all? No. I mean, maybe a couple dollars on YouTube or something, but no, it's not going to affect nothing. And I have shows lined up that I'm going to be being a guest on. I have networks interested in hiring me to be a host. I'm trying to think. Anyways, you just certain somebody's like, okay, for example, I just got a text right before this I went on. I got a text from Minds of Madness podcast, right? Minds of Madness, look them up. They're one of the biggest true crime podcasts in the world. They did a podcast on me, right? They spent like $30,000 on the podcast, making the podcast, and that's what they do per episode. Beautiful, beautiful people. In fact, they enjoyed me so much they gave me $500 to my channel, and they're really good people. And he just said out of the blue, "I miss you, miss talking to you, man. We got a scene going on in our house. Like, what we're gonna do." And they did a ton of research. They did a bunch. I don't know how much genealogy they did, research they did, but they did a ton of research. They have multiple like staff looking into all of this, right? And they came kind of to the same conclusion that Scott does. Listen, the Tocco family is a very big family in Detroit. It landed there as a whole from Terracini, Sicily in the early 1900s. All the aunts, cousins, uncles, grandfather, they all kind of migrated there because they knew each other from the old country. And then they started having kids, and those kids hung around each other. They were uncles, aunts, cousins, and they worked together. They started businesses together. They helped proliferate themselves and each other. All the kids went to the same private schools and churches and everything. And that's when I came up. I was in that generation that was 1970, the 80s and 90s. And so I was around all of them. Now, was there other Toccos that I didn't know? Yeah, lots of them. I knew there was some in Roseville. I know there's Toccos all over the place. I only knew the ones I knew, which was just not that many, but enough. It was enough to where, when I was coming up, I got put to work doing some dirty stuff, and that's it. And that's all I've ever claimed. It's all I ever claimed. I wouldn't say I was working for Jack Tocco when I was his right hand. I'm just, these dorks haven't listened to my show, I guess. I'm my stories. I just, that's kind of a peon, and I admit that. I'm just saying the only reason I'm even in this space, frankly, and even talking about that, only reason ever, is because I have a book that's based on a fictional mafia family based in Detroit. Fictional. If it wasn't for my books, I would have never came out and started talking about it because I don't give a shit. I never did then and don't now. So, but because I do have a book, I thought, you know what? Maybe this would be a good place to market my book. And guess what? Since I do have a history in it, somewhat, a little bit, I rubbed elbows with some people, moved in that circle, did some things. I'll talk about it and then go, hey, check out my book. And people do, and then you go read the reviews of my book, and everybody has this holy shit, like, wow, after they read it, like, dude, it's an amazing story. That's it. I'm here for that, and it's the only reason I'm here. And now that I'm pushing a new book soon, I won't even, I'm burnt out on this, man.
Okay.
I got 375 shows.
Well, Gunnar, I'm going to close this out, but I appreciate you coming on and saying what you had to say. But I really appreciate you coming. to the show because you always do when I ask you.
Yeah,
And
no, and plus you give me a chance to kind of counter what they say and just kind of, and I
well,
know,
that's the way it should be in MobTube or whatever they call this, because of the fact that people are always being accused of things that aren't true.
at the end of the day, to me, but thank you for giving me the stage to counter it. I did on my channel address it and forgot about it. Like, whatever, it is what it is. And if you look at all the comments on the video I did, they're all positive. There's like 2 people saying, "Come on, I can believe whatever." There's some pictures of you with Jack Tocco and Tony Jack. I'm like, you think I would go, Tony Jack or Jack Tocco, some 18-year-old kid going, "Hey, can we get a picture at this wedding, me and you?" Huh? Kid, I was a freaking kid. Nobody. In fact, at those weddings and functions, they didn't have photographers. They didn't want photographers, and if they did, it's like the bridal party or something. Nobody else got into pictures. They never wanted any pictures. So if you can find, another thing was there were a ton of pictures with me and the family at outings and things, but my aunts got them when my grandparents died when I was in prison. My Aunt Pat Tocco and my Aunt Mary Tocco, who are bitches, who screwed me out of part of my inheritance. Not all of it. Me and my sister were supposed to get 1/5 of the estate. They screwed us out of it, and then took all the pictures and all the heirlooms and everything from the family and kept it, and have never said one word to me since. Not one word. And this happened in like 2014 while I was in prison, and they just stole everything. So I'd love to have some of those pictures from my family, but them old scallywags done screwed me over. So it is what it is.
okay, well, Gunnar, you take care. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will be talking to you shortly.
Yeah, man.
I'll probably put this video out tonight.
All right. God bless, man. Have a good one.
Thank you for everything, man. Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Tap me out.
Okay, people, that's kind of controversy going on right now because a lot of people believe that Gunnar is pretty much up on everything, and they're kind of surprised that he didn't know that stuff. But it's for each his own. We're all going to believe what we believe. But one thing Gunnar is absolutely right about, there's a lot of things said on these channels, and I go through this all the time, that are totally false. Don't get me wrong, some of them are true, but a lot of them are false, people. So you have to come to your own conclusion. You can go watch this videotape. Actually, let me put it up to give you an idea. It's called Mobster's Chronicle. If you can go and if you go there, you can see the video and make up your own choice, your own mind. But basically, it's called "Wannabe Wise Guy," Alan Gunnar Lindbloom's 12 Tales Exposed. And that's on Mobster Chronicles if you want to check it out. And it's the fair thing for me to do because I did speak about that. Actually, it was a very well done video, and it had to have some money and intelligence put behind it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from this point on. As for Larry Mazza, as I asked Gunnar, originally I was told that it didn't happen at all, and now it's, yes, it happened. He jumped up at the table. Nothing happened at the table. So the story is once again changing. The only person that can actually settle this thing is Larry Mazza himself. And I've given Larry Mazza opportunity to answer me on this, but of course, he's not going to do that. He's got projects going on right now, and he probably doesn't want to deal with this stuff. But Larry Mazza, you always have that opportunity to answer about the fight, in which right now I think it's probably a true story because you haven't really knocked it down. But anyway, everybody take care, and please like, or hit the bell for reminders for the show. I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting to do this on Gunnar today. And as you can see, it's something that's really seems to be under Gunnar's collar, even though he's saying otherwise. Everybody take care. Thank you.